The Young and the Restless spoilers Monday full episodes June 2, 2025. As the week unfolds under the glare of Genoa City's brightest spotlights, tensions simmer and alliances shift in ways that promise to redefine who holds the true power in this town. Early on a crisp morning, Jack Abbott steps from his sleek black sedan and makes his way with determined strides toward the grand facade of the GCAC, where Victor Newman and Nick Newman have already convened. The stadium's glass and steel structure gleams behind them, a monument to Newman enterprise strength, and Jack's footsteps echo against the marble as he approaches. Nick, sleeves rolled up and brow furrowed, greets Jack with a forced smile. "You know, Dad needs to hear it from both of us," he says quietly, glancing at Victor before laying a steady hand on Jack's shoulder. Victor Newman, ever the kingpin in tailored power suits, shifts his gaze from the distance to lock his steely eyes on Jack. Nick continues, "I want you to know that you've got my full support, and he can trust that." Jack nods curtly, but his mind is already racing ahead to the next battle line. It isn't just business. It's personal, and the undercurrent of family loyalty runs deeper than any profit margin could. Nick takes a breath and, leaning closer so that only Jack and Victor can hear, unspools the latest crisis, Michael Baldwin's sudden resignation. The news has struck like a bolt, and Nick can sense the strain in his father's stance. Victor's jaw clenches, and he paces a few steps away, forced composure giving way to simmering rage. Nick swallows, voice steady but urgent, "Michael Baldwin walked away because of us, because we didn't have his back." Victor whirls around, eyes narrowing as he points an accusatory finger at Jack. "The Abbott family is to blame for everything that goes wrong," he snaps. "Traffic congestion, global warming, frayed shoelaces. If you two aren't to blame, then whose fault is it?" He lets the question hang in the air, dripping with contempt, before storming off in a swirl of designer silk tie and fury, leaving Jack and Nick watching his retreating figure. As Victor's footsteps recede, Nick exhales hard and turns to Jack. "He's gearing up for war," Nick says, jaw tight with frustration. "But honestly, I don't get it. What does a war even accomplish? No one but Dad wants this fight." Jack runs a hand through his hair, concern etched in every line of his face. "You hoped his target would be Dumas," Jack murmurs, "but we both know that won't happen. He's fixated on blaming us, on making us pay for something we didn't break." The name Dumas hangs between them, a specter of looming danger. Aristotle Dumas has made contact with Billy Abbott, and Jack's anxiety deepens. "He's reached out to Billy," Jack continues, voice low. "And that can only spell trouble. If Dumas really aims to take control of Chancellor, Nicky will be in his crosshairs." Nick's eyes narrow at the mention of Nicky's name, the one beacon of humanity that could still sway Victor's merciless tide. "Then we'll step in," Nick declares. "Nicky's family. We'll stand by her side if Dumas comes calling." Their pact sealed in the shadows of the CAC's entryway, brother and cousin exchange a tense glance, each aware that their next moves could alter the fate of two dynasties. Meanwhile, amid boardroom maneuverings and whispered conspiracies, the personal stakes run just as high. Sharon Newman, ever attuned to Nick's emotional undercurrents, spots him leaving the stadium's east wing. She intercepts him at the glass doors, sunlight catching in her auburn hair, and offers an invitation laced with subtext. "Dinner tonight?" she asks, voice soft but insistent. "I'd like to talk, just you and me." Her concern for Nick's entanglement with Phyllis Summers is thinly veiled. She fears the lingering echoes of that passionate whirlwind could distract him, could endanger him, at a moment when unity and focus are paramount. Nick hesitates, the world of family loyalty colliding with the promise of solace offered by Sharon's warm smile. He nods, recognizing that he needs an ally who knows the contours of his heart as well as he does himself. At the same time, at the Abbott mansion, another return stirs the ivy-covered walls and echoes of past memories. Tracy Abbott steps through the front door, her silhouette framed by the grand chandelier, surveying the newly renovated foyer with a mixture of nostalgia and approval. Diane Jenkins's renovations have transformed the space, yet there remains a keen sense of John Abbott's spirit in the air. Tracy inhales deeply and turns to Diane, standing by a sleek new console table. "It may look different," Tracy admits, voice quavering just a touch, "but I feel Dad's presence here more strongly than ever." He would have approved of these changes. He always said innovation is what keeps a legacy alive. Diane smiles knowingly. The complex history between them momentarily set aside in favor of shared respect for the Abbott patriarch's memory. For Tracy, this moment crystallizes a renewed partnership with Diane, an alliance born of desire to preserve both family honor and the Abbott name itself. In this charged atmosphere, where corporate battles and family dramas intertwine, every whispered vow and secret pact sets the stage for a week that promises to reshape alliances, test loyalties, and reveal just how far each Newman and Abbott will go to protect what they hold dear. As Genoa City braces for the fallout, one thing is certain: the coming days will not be for the faint of heart. Claire Grace Newman sat at the long mahogany conference table in the heart of the grand ballroom. Her posture poised but her jaw clenched with polite resistance as Jai Rodriguez launched yet another wildly extravagant proposal. His animated illustrations flickered on the screen behind him, neon leg warmers and Rubik's Cubes for an 80s flashback, elaborately costumed dancers swirling in Bollywood skirts. Even a life-sized papier-mâché elephant flanked by golden drapes. Jai's voice rang with enthusiastic zest. Picture Nikki stepping through a rose-arched gateway into a kaleidoscope of color. We'll have a Bollywood flash mob, and then, just imagine, a marching pachyderm. Claire bit back a laugh as her eyes flicked to Kyle beside her, whose forced grin betrayed both amusement and apprehension. Clearing her throat, she lifted a slender hand. "Jai, thank you for these innovative concepts," she began with the utmost courtesy. But Nikki's milestone celebration calls for something far more refined. Think elegance, think timeless glamour, crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains. An undercurrent of old Hollywood sophistication. No themes that distract from the real purpose of this evening: persuading Victor to see our partnership, and by extension, our future, as one he can champion without reservation. Jai's brow furrowed in mock offense, but Claire held his gaze with calm certainty. "I appreciate your vision, truly. But please, strip away the excess. Let this be an evening of subtle grandeur, not sensory overload." She watched as the planner fiddled with his stylus, then nodded with exaggerated solemnity. "Understood. Subtle grandeur it is, minus the elephant." Kyle exhaled softly, giving her hand a quick squeeze in gratitude. Together, they left the concept meeting with renewed optimism that simplicity might yet sway the most formidable of patriarchs. Meanwhile, in the vaulted drawing room of Newman Ranch, Victoria Newman paced before the bay windows, her voice measured but laced with steel as she confronted her father. Nikki sat quietly at the antique marble side table, concern etching fine lines around her eyes. Victor stood by the hearth, arms folded, radiating the same cold authority that had driven boardroom empires to their knees, and now he seemed on the verge of turning his power against the very people who sought only his blessing. Victoria's tone rose with indignation as she recalled the latest blow to family harmony. Michael Baldwin's abrupt departure and the dark cloud of blame Victor had cast over every corner of the Newman-Abbott alliance. "Father, I will not tolerate another one of your manipulations," Victoria said, each word clipped and purposeful. "You've torn apart marriages, fractured loyalties. Now you threaten to sabotage Claire and Kyle's chance at happiness just because you can't bear to see anyone challenge your control." Nikki reached for Victoria's hand, her voice soft but resolute. "Victor, honey, this doesn't serve any of us. Claire and Kyle need your support, not your ire. Can't you see what this means to them?" Victor's jaw twitched, the weight of his own ambition clashing with the remnants of paternal instinct buried deep beneath his steely exterior. For a moment, The room held its breath as he stared at Victoria. Her fiery determination reflected in Nicky's hopeful gaze. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he exhaled with a grudging acknowledgement. "Very well," he said. Voice low but carrying the unmistakable echo of authority. "I promise I will hold my tongue, or at least, I will try." Victoria allowed a small. Victoria's smile to surface before turning on her heel and sweeping from the room, leaving Nicky to close the door gently behind her. As the light from the setting sun filtered through the lace drapes, mother and daughter stood together, united in purpose, ready to face the tumultuous week ahead, certain that in Genoa City, even the stiffest wills could be softened when family stood as one. Under the pearly dawn light filtering through the high windows of Newman Ranch, Nicky stood in the sweeping curve of the great hall, her fingers brushing against the delicate filigree of the music box Victor had pressed into her hand only moments before. It was a gift, a precious, shining token that captured the tinkling innocence of childhood birthdays spent beneath candy-striped balloons, and yet beneath its polished veneer lay the weight of her husband's unspoken edicts. She turned the key, and the soft melody tumbled into the silent room, a lullaby half forgotten, half remembered, its gentle notes in ironic contrast to the storm of ambition her father, Victor, had just unleashed. He had leaned in close, steel-veined with concern, and declared in that low, infuriating tone that left no room for negotiation, "Kyle Abbott will only break Claire's heart, Nicky. And I will not relinquish my right to pry them apart." His eyes, usually so warm when they looked at her, glinted now with the cold certainty of a man who saw weakness in any union that dared to challenge his empire. Then, with the same deliberate calm, he had handed her the music box and demanded her promise, "Swear to me, you'll make me wait until after your birthday celebration. No assault on the Abbotts before then." And Nicky, her pulse thundering in her ears, had forced a nod, an affirmation that she would curb the most ruthless instincts of the most powerful man in Genoa City for the mere fleeting span of one glittering evening. But as the final notes of the lullaby faded into the hush, Nicky's mind refused to accept such a half measure. Why should she ask her father to wait even a heartbeat? Why tolerate the hemorrhaging of trust between two families whose futures she had fought so desperately to bind together in hope? It was a question that clung to her heart like a shadow even as she shut the music box and lifted her chin in defiance of the world he sought to control. Meanwhile, in another continent but no less fraught with the echoes of geopolitical ambition, Amanda Sinclair sat in the sleek boardroom of her Washington, D.C. condominium, her fingertips drumming a nervous tattoo across the polished mahogany tabletop. On the large flat screen behind her flickered video stills of Aristotle Dumas, the enigmatic tycoon whose financial maneuvers had reshaped Chancellor Enterprises and thrown the Abbott and Newman dynasties into disarray. Phyllis Summers had come to her with a silver-tongued speech about shared vision and mutual benefit, persuading Amanda that only by flying to the capital and meeting Dumas in person could they secure the future of Chancellor. Now, Amanda stared at the deposit ticket for the next flight, an invitation to step into a world of high-stakes boardroom battles and whispered conspiracies, a world she had never fully inhabited. Her heart fluttered with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Could she abandon her city's legacy, her brother Devon's dreams, and the fragile sense of belonging she had painstakingly built? Phyllis had assured her that Dumas would be an ally of immeasurable power, that together they could drive Chancellor forward, but Amanda sensed an undercurrent of something darker. A hunger for dominion that matched Victor's own unrelenting ambition. Later that afternoon, in the softly lit expanse of Daniel Romalotti's home office, Phyllis prepared to deliver the bombshell she had withheld for far too long. The calendar on his desk glowed with the date, Thursday, May 29th. And Daniel's expectant reflection looked back at her from the polished surface of his laptop screen, a reflection worn with fatigue and tempered by hope. She closed the lid and turned to face him, her lips curving upward in a cautious smile. She would tell him of her plans, how she envisaged partnering with both Daniel and Amanda to steer Chancellor through treacherous financial waters. How they would carve out a seat at the table for her son, Calvin, and how together they could outmaneuver the old guard who clung too tightly to yesterday's power. And yet doubt flickered at the edges of her resolve. Would Daniel, her son's father, understand the necessity of forging unlikely alliances? Would he see the promise of resurrecting a company that had once been his family's pride? Or would the very notion of her jostling for control, of sharing the boardroom with aristocrats and moguls, drive him to rescind his support and leave her flights and meeting rooms empty at the last minute? She tightened her palms into fists, determined that nothing, not even a cancelled flight, would thwart her. If the meeting in D.C. collapsed, she would pivot instantly, chart another course. And her unwavering conviction would carry her through every contingency. Back in Genoa City, the web of burgeoning dramas wound tighter still as the Abbott siblings, Jack, Ashley, Tracy, and Kyle, each navigated their own crossroads of loyalty, love, and legacy. Jack, fresh from his tense confrontation with Victor at the GCAC, had retreated to the quiet comfort of Jabot's executive suite, where the scent of engraved leather and polished glass offered little solace from the churning questions in his mind. Could he balance the imperative to protect his family's enterprise with the filial duty that bound him to the Newmans? Would his alliance with Nick, and even Victoria be strong enough to deflect the looming storm Victor had promised to unleash the moment Nikki's birthday candles were extinguished? Across town, Kyle stood in the shadow of the Grand Estate's ornate gates, replaying Claire's plea for elegance and simplicity in his head. He knew the weight of this party extended far beyond a mere birthday celebration. It was the stage upon which his future with Claire would be judged, and the final test of Victor's grudging acceptance. Yet beneath that knowledge lay his own fragile uncertainty. Could love triumph when the entire city's greatest powers were arrayed on either side? And would Claire, whose grace under fire had enraptured him from the moment they first met, still trust him enough after the fireworks of the party faded? Meanwhile, Sharon Newman watched these machinations unfold with a mother's anxiety and a friend's protective fervor. She had slipped an invitation into Nick's blazer pocket, an earnest plea for dinner that evening, hoping to anchor him in the warmth of shared laughter and the simple truth that not every conversation ends the cold calculus of boardroom strategies. If only she could steer his heart away from the tidal pull of the Newman-Abbott feud, away from the ghosts of betrayals past that whispered through the corridors of every boardroom in Genoa City. And somewhere high above the interplay of power and passion, the Newmans' matriarch, Mary Newman, looked down from her portrait in the mansion's hallway, her gentle smile a whispered promise that love, resilience, and the quiet courage to forge new paths could endure even the most ruthless games of thrones. Breath for Nikki's grand soiree. Every player in this tangled saga felt the tremors of destiny beneath their feet. Will Jimmy's trap finally ensnare an unsuspecting foe? Can Victor's promise of restraint hold until the last confetti flutters to the floor? Will Amanda choose the shine of Dumas's empire over the familiars of home? And will Phyllis's confession bind Daniel to her dreams, or unravel in the face of hard truths? In Genoa City, every heartbeat was portent. Every whispered promise carried the weight of legacies and betrayals. And as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting gilded hues across the marble floors and corporate towers, one certainty remained: when Newman, Abbott, Dumas, and Summers collide, there can be no half measures, only the relentless pursuit of power, love, and the fragile alliances that bind them all.